Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 218. We've got a returning guest who hasn't been that long since we saw him. And we'll get to Kevin in a minute. But before we do that, I guess I should introduce myself. If for some reason you stumbled onto this and you don't know, you're on my channel, so I'm guessing you know who I am. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe Kevin sent some people here that don't know about me. I don't know. But yeah, I'm Scott with CircWorks. You can find my work at circworks.com. And if you've been following this journey, and you kind of see the look on my face, I had to, I've been doing this this merch by Amazon thing, and it's really difficult to kind of move up in those ranks. And so, I had to shank a few people. So I got both and tattoos. So that means I am out of the first two tiers.
Yeah.
The most difficult part, really. So yeah, so that just to reiterate how it works is once you get approved for the program, they kind of ease you in. So you start off at this 10 tier where you can upload 10 t-shirt designs, and you have to sell 10 before you can move up to the 25 tier. And then same thing, you have to upload 25 designs and sell 25. And after you do that, then you can move up to the 100 tier, and it is sort of a numbers game. So now I've got a total of 100 slots, and now I've just got to start filling those slots and stuff like that. So yeah, I got a lot of designs and a lot of work to do. The hard part really is because it's just good designs alone won't cut it. You've got to have the right keywords and make sure that people can find this, because this is Amazon and it's like the biggest marketplace in the world. So if you don't have that, your stuff gets lost. And it's kind of, I have to see what happens, because honestly, I don't think anyone has stumbled or has through keywords or anything has bought any of my shirts organically. I think it's all people that I have sent to get shirts and stuff, through the community and stuff like that. So so we'll see what happens, but so far I think I'm doing all right. I think it seems like it takes a lot of people a little bit longer than it's taken me so far to get where I am. So I'm pretty stoked. So enough about me. Josh, what about you?
How's it going? I am knee deep in formatting my comic that you can read online at quarterlystories.com. It's my personal story of finding faith and struggling with mental illness. And it's handwritten, hand lettered, hand inked, and hand drawn by me and handed to you, hopefully someday in print. That day is getting sooner, but until then, you can read it at quarterlystories.com. And you can check out my portfolio at joshuakemble.com, where I post, freelance stuff, posters, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, but just formatting books. And stoked to talk to my buddy. Yeah.
Who's your buddy?
So that's about it. Yeah, who is my buddy over here?
Well, it's obviously me.
Well, I have a buddy with prison tears, but I'm afraid to call him a buddy, because with those kind of words, I might end up having to have some tears myself.
Now that I have earned the tears, it's probably the last you'll see them. I will have them laser removed. So.
Oh no!
Man. Prison is fun, isn't it? Yeah, I'm here, Kevin Cross.
Yes.
Yeah. What do I have going on? Back to YouTube. Last time I was here, we talked a little bit about burnout and getting back into it, and then that kind of turned out to be my first episode. Getting back in was kind of fleshing out some of the stuff that I was saying and on that, but doing a little bit of a deeper dive, I guess. And yeah, and I just kind of decided to not just make my channel solely about my art or comic making, but also just for fun, have a wild card series in there that's kind of a comic book comedy series. So
now is that live, Kevin? Because I saw it on Patreon, so I didn't know if that went live.
It is live, yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
So yeah, what I try to do, unfortunately, the next episode, I think I don't think it's going to be able to be like a sneak peek or something, on Patreon, because I'm a day late, and I need that video up by tomorrow. So there'll be a new video up sometime tomorrow, and it will be the second of the comic book series called Kevin Reads Comics, generically enough. And yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with it so far. I mean, you know, I'm farther than people are seeing. I'm already on the third video. You know, doing some finishing edits tonight and uploading tonight. So episode 2 of that will be out, and it's thank you, TJ. It's Devil Dinosaur right now, which was written by Jack Kirby. It was his last work with Marvel Comics, and he was kind of an FU on his way out from Marvel Comics as well. So so there's some entertainment there in his you know, kind of lack of giving any kind of fucks. But yeah, that's pretty fun. And so yeah, and then next week there'll be a couple more episodes, probably not of the Kevin Reads Comics, but of art episodes. So yeah, that's Macely. I can't even talk. So yeah, I've gotten back into doing the videos, and now I'm talking by myself so much. And even though we've got a screen in between us, I know you dudes, but it's weird to like talk to people who now talk back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who are my kid. So yeah, I'm getting all tongue tied from talking so much for these videos. But yeah, so yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. I've been diving in deep, so there'll be a lot of things that are coming out that are sitting on my computer, ready and waiting for the edits, and I'm just gonna push them out.
Yeah,
I love it. I love this stuff. Yeah.
I was going to
Go
say,
ahead.
if you haven't seen Kevin Reads Comics, definitely go check it out, because it's great, and you could tell he put a lot of time and everything into it, and it looks great. So definitely
Yeah, it take a long time. So patreon.com/Kevin Cross, y'all.
Oh yeah, compensate this man. But like
Yeah, those
seriously,
are a lot of work.
it's good stuff, and like the sketch video is great too, and it's cool to kind of see you come back, and it feels like you're kind of hitting full stride, which is awesome. So
Yeah,
I can't wait to see what comes.
Sketch one's a little weird because it's well, I've never really done that. It's almost like doing the Artcasters but alone. You know, except for then I edit out and you know, sometimes it's kind of hard to draw and have a one-sided conversation, you know. So I you know, I'll edit out like the parts where I'm like, oh wait a minute, I should be talking right now. But I think those will get better, you know, as I get used to it and stuff.
Yeah, it's hard to like when you're sketching to just do live audio that doesn't have like long pauses, because when you're sketching, inevitably you have that like moment where you get in the zone and then you're like, oh wait, like 20 minutes went by where I didn't talk, you know? Like,
right. I mean, the excuse there kind of is that it's sketchbook, so it doesn't have you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a fantastic finished illustration.
Yeah.
And the idea with those also is that you know, I mean, the second one, it's called Sketchbook Time. That's that new series. Everything I'm doing has a series name. But I'm just going to go into those episodes with, I want to draw on my sketchbook, and you know, just kind of see what the topic is. You know, I'm just gonna go. You know.
Yeah.
And then on the side of the I'm trying to work it where like it's going to be kind of split screen, where you see me drawing on one side and there's always going to be reference or something that influenced the sketch, you know, so that people can hang out with their sketchbooks and, you know, do their warm-up sketching that day, or cool down at night, hang out with me, listen to me vamp about whatever.
Nice.
So and try not to cuss so that I don't get super demonetized, even though, sorry, I already cussed on your channel, Scott. But yeah, that's also another fun thing with the Kevin Reads comic series is finding ways to not use curse words and finding alternatives, which I think actually makes it funnier for me anyway. So yeah, I guess that's what I've been up to, doing some comic stuff behind the scenes too. That'll be all on Patreon. And well, I mean, I guess I can bring it up now. Part of what the next sketchbook time, is that what I called it? Sketchbook time video that's going to be out like this coming up Monday or Tuesday. And I kind of mentioned another comic that I'm sort of working on as I'm getting to that almost boring level on Monkey Mod that you're doing, although not as many pages as you're doing with your graphic novel. We're talking just a single issue, but figuring out where all the stuff goes, all the text and extras and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So while we're on the topic of comics, maybe that's a good segue into what we're talking about, or what we had proposed to talk about. And I don't know if you guys want me to start, but
yeah, go
for it.
The whole impetus came out of the first Sketch Time video that I did last week. And I talked about the burnout and stuff and some of the hecks I was having. And one of them was, as you guys know, I love the spy genre and detective noir stuff. And there's a lot of tropes in there. And the Kingsman movies, there's a third one coming out, I think this summer or spring, maybe. I don't remember. But, so I watched the first two, enjoyed them, and the second one was basically the story arc that I had for my comic. And the first one didn't bother me so much, but it was basically the organization, the Kingsman organization, is basically very, very similar to the organization that my character's in. What didn't bother me about that is that's not necessarily an original thing, because you've got Get Smart, there's God, what was the organ? I can only think of Chaos. What was the Get Smart?
Yeah,
What was
I can't remember what the
Control? No.
Yeah, Control, I think.
Yeah. And then there's these organizations like that. I mean, in James Bond, there's Spectre, and granted, they're the bad organization, but that's one of the tropes, is these organizations, and sometimes they don't adhere to any specific government, so that's fine. But second movie came out, and I was like, God bless the child that whoever wrote this exact same comic. I mean, my comic. Yeah. Salazar Art Nation. Did you ever watch Lancelot Link's Secret Chimp? I did when I was a little kid. And yeah, I mean, that's one of the tropes, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But what started was, part of what kind of made me like take a pause, I suppose. I don't know if pause is the right word, because I was still working on like the boring stuff of issue 1, because that's fine. But looking at my scripts, I was just like, oh gee, what do I do now? I mean, I know Kingsman isn't like this massive franchise, but it's still pretty big,
Yeah.
And it's big enough to make 3 movies, and I enjoyed them, and maybe they're not like Avengers huge or something like that, or Marvel huge, but they could be someday. Who knows? And then I found out about this comic that is also a video game called Black Sad, I believe. And it's more it's more detective stuff. I haven't read it, and I haven't played the video game, but I think it's more detective noir stuff. But it's kind of, it's like Monkey Mod. It's all kind of animals as avatars for personalities and things like that. And you know, I mean, that's also not very new, but it was just this culmination of these things that kind of made me look like, okay, whoa, wait a minute. Now, no story's original, but you know, and everybody's take on a thing. I mean, look at Marvel and DC. You know, look at how many, like, someone's got Aquaman, someone's got Submariner, someone's got, you know, Wolverine, someone's got Blood Wolf. You know, but so nothing's original. It's just, and as the creator, you're going to have a different take on even the tropes. But you know, and then Scott wrote in the comments on that video, essentially something similar to that. And I'm probably paraphrasing, but and so there's that idea, like, I don't want to stop doing Monkey Mod, spy comic, and but I feel like I need to tweak the story a bit, you know?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's interesting because it's like, on one hand, tweaking the story is good. On another, all the reasons you mentioned are a really good reason to kind of persist with the story as is, unless you have other reasons for wanting to tweak it, you know? Because like you were saying, it's like, you know, to me, the secret organization you were talking about, at least from what I remember when we talked about it, seemed way more like old school, like Get Smart kind of riffing, you know?
Yeah.
And then also the fact that it is crossed over with the animal avatars, it's like, I just wouldn't really see it as, I don't know. It's like, I almost feel like, what would happen if like they had stopped Walking Dead because they're like, well, there are zombie films, you know? It's like,
right. I mean, and that's not exactly what I'm trying to get at either. But it's just like the idea of, for this show, came of like, you know, that's going to happen. What, how would you handle it? What, you know, what idea? I guess we're like idea generation for these comics. You know, like, you're wrapping something up, and before we started recording, you were saying, you know, well, I'm, you know, putting this book together finally. What next? You know, aside from like the promo and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
We just kind of joked and flippantly said, well, the next thing, you know?
yeah, exactly.
So I don't know. Do you want to? I was thinking maybe we could tackle that, because, you know, like Scott had mentioned also in the comment, you know, and you just mentioned now, like, The Walking Dead is not the first zombie comic. It's not the first zombie property. Scott's take on like kids and monsters and supernatural, you know, that's. I mean, Scott said before, it's wearing its influence on its sleeve, you know, like, I think Monkey Mod is wearing that influence on its sleeve as well.
Yeah.
So maybe, Scott, maybe I'll ask you this. I'm the interviewer now. See what I did there? The Artcasters with special guests Scott Circley and Jeff Kimball.
Hey, technically, you're one of the first hosts of this, so you are free to take the reins, sir.
I'm joking, but thanks. So Scott, maybe I'll ask you, like, you know, we've both, you know, established that we've been influenced by other things that led us to your comic, Young and the Dead, and my comic, The Monkey Mod Friends Show. How did you approach that, using those influences? Like, what was your thinking so that you would make it, you know, like, twist it so it's more your own, not, you know?
Yeah. So and it's important to understand that things that, you know, things that you kind of grow up with and everything, other people grow up with the same stuff. So they're going to be influenced by those same things. If you're sort of in the same age group, and it's not that you're copying somebody else, or it's just that's sort of in the zeitgeist, or that's what influenced you. That's why. So when I first, you know, put out Young and the Dead, just give you an idea how old it is. Later on, J.J. Abrams put out Super 8, which is about a bunch of kids in an alien invasion. And same thing that you were feeling, I felt the same thing. And there's just like weird coincidences. Like I think even the town that it took place in, I think had the same name. Like it was like Montgomery, which I named after the school that when I lived in California, that was the name of the grade school. So I just called the county Montgomery County. I think it actually says that in Super 8. So I mean that's just a bizarre coincidence, and who knows, why that is. But all these little, because at the time there wasn't, when I grew up, my influence, the things that I like were like, movies like Goonies and Monster Squad and E.T. Explorers and all these movies where kids were sort of the heroes and it was kid adventures and things like that. And that kind of dried up for a while. And there really wasn't anything like that until Super 8 came out. And now there's more of it. Now Stranger Things is like huge right now. So, if you didn't know any better, you may look at like Young and the Dead and say, oh, he's just trying to capitalize on the popularity of Stranger Things. But I'm pretty sure Young and the Dead was out before the Duffer Brothers had even an idea of what Stranger Things was going to be. So then it also that also shows how long it takes me to put out these issues, but because I only have 4 of them so far. But
let's not beat yourself up about that because I can't talk much about this.
But yeah, I mean, the stuff we grew up with, the stuff that influences us, same thing. I mean, it only makes sense that if you're influenced by Get Smart and Mission Impossible and our Man from U.N.C.L.E., all that kind of stuff, James Bond, that's and there's tropes and things in there. It's going to find its way into your work, and it's going to also find its way into other people that love that same stuff too. So you're going to get some similarities, but I think everyone is going to tell their story a little differently. I'm pretty sure that none of these other properties out there have an anthropomorphic monkey in it. So I mean, your story is going to be different, and the way you tell it, and your just the way you approach stories is going to be different, even if some of the themes are the same. And the medium's different too. I mean, a lot of these things, well, you had mentioned, I think one of them you mentioned was a comic series, but, and I've seen, I'm a fan of the Kingsman movies and stuff. And as a fan, I never made that. I never thought, oh, this is like, oh no, Kevin's in trouble. This is a lot like Kevin's, what Kevin's doing. Of course, I don't know.
Yeah, you don't know the next issue. That's what I was talking about for me personally. Is the story arc after the first issue? Yeah. Okay. It's essentially the second movie of Kingsman. So,
I mean, and that could be, and that's even like I said, I think your story would be told a little differently. But if you are kind of venturing into spoiler territory or something like that, maybe that is cause to make some adjustments and things like that, because you don't want if it's something's already been done similar and people are going to notice that and they're going to pick up on maybe something that you want to be a page turner or a reveal or something like that. Maybe in that case you may have to adjust some things. But yeah, I mean, there's really no original ideas. Everything's kind of based on something, but you got to add your own spin on it and everything. So I don't know.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's
go ahead.
There's an old saying that like they always say in English classes when you're like learning like basic creative writing, where it's like there's basically like 5 kinds of stories and they were all told by Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. So pretty much like anything you do is ripping off Shakespeare. And can be boiled down to that. And then it's funny because I've gone further. I think I've talked to you about this, Kevin, but I have this whole theory that there's pretty much no group stories that have like more than 5 characters that aren't just ripping off Charlie Brown. Most group stories rip off Peanuts because like the dynamic of characters inevitably end up being all the Peanuts characters. Like it's a weird thing, but it's like so I don't know. I think if the similarities are too close, then yeah, there might need to be some reworks, because you don't want to be the thief and the cobbler, you know, where it's like you know, I'm sure a lot of people who've watched this know of that, but it's like, just to briefly describe it, it's like, you know, there's this animator who spent his whole lifetime making this animated film, The Thief and the Cobbler.
Yeah, it was Williams.
I believe so. I know he
The guy
worked
who
on
did Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
Right?
So then he goes to work for Disney. He gets rehired by Disney to work on Roger Rabbit. And while he's working on Roger Rabbit, is showing like, hey, this is the cool thing I'm working on the side. And then Disney, lo and behold, develops, like a couple years later, this plot and storyline with character designs and backgrounds and everything that basically are that guy's story. So then they release Aladdin, and then he finally releases years later, gets Thief and the Cobbler. Yeah. But it's like, it's pretty quick how quickly they ripped him off. And then it's like, you know, 2 or 3 years after the release of Aladdin, he finally gets a distributor to put out Thief and the Cobbler, and everybody reviews it saying, this is the worst ripoff of Aladdin.
Right.
So that's the horror story for anyone, like, where you might be the first to have an idea, and if you release it after, you could look like you're mimicking. And that's kind of a nightmare scenario. So I could kind of see that, but I do think a lot of the act of creating and coming up with ideas is having faith in them. And it's this weird thing where you kind of just have to move forward. And I do think doubts about originality can be real problematic. I think for like musicians too, where it's like, if you're so worried about being original with songs, you can actually end up in this conundrum where you just don't feel comfortable playing a note because, like, there's only so many chords on the guitar, you know? So you obviously don't want to, like, you know, do the riff for Iron Man and then be like, yeah, I'm an original, you know, artist here. But there's an inevitable sense of, like, there's going to be some overlap with other artists no matter what, because you're playing the same instrument, you know, with the same limitations. So I'm rambling, but it's like, for me with ideas, like, it is hard. And in t-shirts, it was especially hard. Like for me in t-shirts, like if the concept had been used, it was very hard to do it. Like, first off, if it had been used, you'd have to do it better. And second off, like, you know, you didn't make much of a name for yourself in t-shirt designs if you're just riffing on an idea that already exists, you know?
Right.
But if you can hit on that thing that's really obvious that nobody's done, then you're like in kind of a gold territory. But I mean, if we're talking about like generating, because I felt like that was more the crux, like Scott, like I think Kevin was like trying to figure out, like, what do you feel brings like the individuality to your story? Like, what's the things you considered that you wanted to voice, you know, in
Right.
that kind
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. You know, I guess I think that was kind of where I thought the topic would probably go, you know?
Yeah. Me too.
You know, because like, you know, okay. So we've got our interests. They're going to establish or pepper what we want to make. So my question, and you know, I've got my answer, but I want to hear your guys too, is when it comes time to, you know, I'm ready to do that new comic or, you know, create a new property or something like that. You know, just the question of like, how does that happen for you guys? That's probably too abstract, because of course, you know, we're creative people. Just like, bing, I've got a thing and I can't stop thinking about it. Now I have to make it. You know what I mean? But once you get to that idea, like, so just to back up a little bit, part of this this monkey mod thing where I was like, this is really similar, and I've since found my the tweaks I need to make, you know. to it. So that's not bothersome. But in that, I had to think about it and stuff, and remind myself that yes, it's still a story I wrote, not knowing that this is happening, so it's still going to feel like mine and this and that. But I was going, I told myself, and I think I said it in public a few times too, was that once I get a new comic idea, since they're so labor intensive, they're all going into Monkey Mod and all the ideas, so I just get that out, and maybe if it doesn't seem like it doesn't work, it'll make a more interesting story in a comic that doesn't feel like it works. What ended up happening, though, is I said that a while ago, and I've changed my opinion. and so I took a whole chunk out of the Monkey Mod and Friends show that I wanted to be its own comic, that I actually started talking about it when I was staying at your house. So you know about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I put that into Monkey Mod, and I'd taken it back out. It was originally going to be, I won't go into what it is, but it was originally going to be just kind of straight sword and sandal, sword and sorcery, D&D kind of stuff, Conan the Barbarian. Which is also not original, in concept of that. But taking it out and then thinking about what to do with this story that I've had kicking around for, what is it, like 4 years now, 3.5?
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's that fun part where all the initial ideas are down, but now you go through the plot and the characters, and you start seeing like the problems. Like this character might be a little too similar to this character, and that someone needs a foil, someone's too serious, so there needs to be somebody who's lighthearted, perhaps, or maybe some of the threads don't tie together. How do you guys deal with that? What's your do you guys have a certain process? Do you guys just kind of write?
I can kind of, because I wasn't sure where we were going to go with this, so I was kind of prepared to kind of talk about some of the ways I sort of generate ideas and kind of the thought process of how certain things, because right now I'm working on a lot of these t-shirt designs. So well,
let's talk about that. I mean,
okay.
I'm talking comics, but it's just general idea generation once you get that initial spark and have to improve on the idea, I guess.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll kind of show some of these t-shirts that I'm working on, and I'll kind of give you my thought process. So first of all, the way I've watched a lot of videos, because I'm just, like I said, I'm just getting into this whole merch by Amazon thing. And almost all the advice that I hear is, and most of the people doing this are not, like I've mentioned this before too, but they're more marketers. So what almost everyone's advice is, go to Pinterest or go to, one of the other, t-shirt sites or something like that or whatever, and find like quotes and things like that, and basically take the quotes and do different art for it. And for me, I want to kind of come up with my own original idea. Now, this may not work out because to me, it kind of, I kind of compare it to like Hollywood kind of this, and I'll have to know when I get more into it. But what I'm thinking is everyone's kind of, because they're marketers, they're trying to find something that they know will sell. And if they look and see this quote, people like this quote, it's selling. So I'm just going to take the same quote and I'm going to do something with it and it will sell. Kind of like Hollywood. These movie studios aren't going to invest in some original idea. They're going to keep churning out the same stuff until somebody comes along with an original idea and it's successful. Then they're going to jump on that bandwagon and run that to the ground. So it's kind of like that. That's the way I'm imagining it. Again, we'll see what happens. But so I'm trying to come up with like my own quotes and things like that. And so far, like I said, people aren't finding them because maybe they're not searching for these. Maybe they don't know that these quotes exist, even though you can use different keywords and things and hopefully drive people to it. So I'll kind of show you, I'm working on, I now that the next major holiday coming up is St. Patrick's Day. So I'll show you some of these designs. Let me see if I can screen share here. Okay. All right. So this is one that I kind of came up with, and it says, my mom always told me, don't talk to gingers, or was it strangers? The point is I never listen. So, and maybe I thought this was clever. I don't know. Maybe it's not. Again, we'll find out, like if it sells, if people gravitate to it or whatever. But so, for this, the original thing was just like, I'm thinking, I saw a t-shirt that said that, I think it was like the ginger beard man or something. And so, and there was a lot, again, that was one that people just kept taking the idea and everything like that. So I'm thinking, Irish, a lot of Irish people with red hair. I'm thinking, I want to make shirts that you would wear like to a bar when you're out drinking or whatever like that. And basically the idea behind a lot of these shirts is just, maybe help you get laid. I can't guarantee that would help it happen. But anyway, so if you're into redheads or whatever, so I'm thinking, my idea was, it just started off with, don't talk to strangers, don't talk to gingers. And it could have, but I couldn't just say that, don't talk to gingers, because it doesn't make enough sense. So hopefully there's kind of levels here. And the idea is that, mom told me that the person's not getting it, it's like they're forgetting. And then it comes back to say, the point is I never listened. So it's kind of like, hopefully it gives the opinion that, yes, I like redheads or whatever. I'm not, I'm kind of being a bad boy here or whatever, because, or girl, whoever's wearing it, I guess. But, I don't listen to what people tell me. I just do whatever I want, whatever. So that's kind of what I came up for that one. Here's another one. Now this one I had to change. This was my original idea. Just get lucky, ask me how. Again, back to like, they used to have like my uncle used to sell like Herbalife or something. It was like, lose weight now, ask me how. So again, I mean, I assume you guys could get the idea behind this one. It's just like,
yeah, no, what is that about, Scott? Could you explain that?
Yeah.
Could you explain it in detail, please?
So no, well, it's basically, hopefully use it as a conversation starter.
Right, if you're going to a casino or something, right?
Yeah. So, but I had to change it, because one thing you'll find out with these merch things is that a lot of these, so Get Lucky is trademarked from some clothing brand, so I couldn't use that. So I had to kind of change it around to Getting Lucky. So this, I don't think it's as good, but I mean, this is kind of what I had to go with, because I couldn't use Get Lucky. So I'm getting lucky tonight, ask me how. Kind of the same principle. So here's another one that I came up with. So the idea behind this one here, I don't know, something to do with driving snakes out of Ireland. I'm just here for the green beer. So, people go out and party on St. Patrick's Day. Most people aren't even Irish. Most people don't even care what St. Patrick's Day is about or anything. So I'm just kind of going off of that. Now, there's sort of this legend, and it's not really what St. Patrick's Day is about, but that St. Patrick drove it's a tall tale or whatever. They drove snakes out of Ireland or whatever. So the idea behind this one, of course, is just like, hey man, I'm just here to have fun. I don't care what, it may be something to do with driving snakes out of Ireland or whatever. And then I did another version of it, because I'm not a beer drinker. So then I just did one with the Irish whiskey. So this is sort of, kind of my thought process. I'll show you two more real quickly. This one I did see somebody actually maybe had done after. And like I said, sometimes this one here. So I got a lucky him and a lucky her. The idea is that, hopefully you get some couples wearing these together so you can sell two shirts. And I think somebody did, and sometimes you'll come up with an idea and then you'll go and you look, oh, somebody else came up with it too. Now the design's a little different. I went with the little heart as part of the 4-leaf clover and everything like that, and just sort of the reverse. So hopefully it makes it a little more original. But anyway, so the whole idea is, and the way I generate these ideas is, I basically just dump a whole, phrases or whatever, whether it's, there's something here, don't talk to strangers, don't talk to gingers, kind of sounds the same thing, whatever. And I'll drop that down. I've got a big list of stuff on Trello or whatever. And I just dump every single idea, good or bad. And I kind of work it to death until I find something that kind of works, And I mean, I know Josh, Josh has done t-shirts and stuff like this, so I'm sure I don't know how his process is and everything. I cut out. I'm trying to, how do I get rid of that? Okay. Yeah. So there. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's just, I do that, it's whether it's comic storytelling or whatever, I just throw all my ideas in a thing. And then I've got so many different ideas for whatever, t-shirts or whatever. And then I just kind of go down the list and, and sometimes it's an idea and I can't figure out what to do with it. Sometimes something comes up, but I just kind of mull things up in my head, Sometimes I'll write down something, I can't think of anything. And then I'll be out, jogging or whatever, and like, oh wait, no, that makes sense. So does that kind of help? Does it give you an idea? It's kind of, because it's hard to, I can't like teach people how to be creative necessarily, but I can kind of show you sort of the process that I use. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah.
I kind of, my thought process is a little similar. Basically, like, I have a couple things. Like with stories, it's usually like generated through, like, I used to try to just be like a creative writer who just sit down and like boil it, like just go with inspiration and kind of end up wherever it took me. And that didn't bode well because I ended up making a lot of stories that had a ton of plot holes and problems and loose ends. And so there's interesting peaks. My last graphic novel was kind of like that. Like I kind of had a loose idea of where I wanted to go. And then I just started doing page at a time and kind of filling in the gaps. And then, so I feel like there's really some moments that are really strong in that story. I might publish it at some point, but it definitely has a lot of plot holes and kind of problems, even with pacing, like a lot of talking heads, tons of talking heads, which is something I learned from. So kind of avoid talking heads or try to do the Wally Wood thing and vary it a little more. But with stories in general, like now, what I first want to do is have a story that I just can't not write. Like, so because of the time involved in comics, I feel like if I can avoid doing comics, I'll do that. But if there's a story I really feel needs telling, then that to me is like a really good sign. Like if I feel compelled to tell a story, and then a good hint to me is like a story you would tell somebody, like at a bar.
That's what I was going to say. Like, what is your? Because we've all got our. I guess we've all got those points where we're like, oh, I want to do this, and then sometimes we just realize, no, that's not the one.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So for me, it's weird because I get inclinations all the time. Like I used to have this hankering to do a kid's book about a kid who grows a mustache, and then somebody actually did it, called Mustache Baby, and I think mine was going to be called Mustache Kid, and I was like, son of a, like, it was a very similar thing where it's like you have this idea, you're like, well, when I get to kids' books, I'll get to that. But yeah, I get ideas all the time. Like Benji and I will be drawing, and I'll draw a dinosaur and be like, it'd be fun to draw dinosaurs. I want to do a story with the dinosaur. Like, yeah. I think creative inevitably, like you're hit with all these little like flints that could become a fire. Yeah. And for me, like what it came down to is there's just a story that I really feel needs to be told. I'm drawn to autobio. So while I kind of played at doing fiction for a while, even doing like semi-autobio, but like slice of life, I always felt like I was like skating around doing the thing I loved. And so for me, part of picking the story was like when I was in graduate school and like given this opportunity to like focus on art I loved. And I had this like really big moment where I was like, well, I do a lot of t-shirts with like funny jokes and I like humor and stuff. And like, but what did I want to do? And originally in comics and a lot of like when I started taking comics seriously, I really wanted to be like a Robert Crumb, like, you know, Zap and Raw kind of comics. Like that's the kind of comics that I've always wanted to make. It's not necessarily the ones I always want to read, but it's the kind of thing I wanted to make. And so because I like confessional autobio type stuff, when it's done well, I want to dip into that. And because I feel like I have a story to tell from my own life, it's like that kind of helps me navigate it. Now, when you get into autobio, like there's all sorts of considerations that I consider, which is like, first off, like there's a lot of like things I want to avoid, like the plague that are problematic with autobio. So one is like glorifying yourself. I've read so many autobio comics where the person's like, and I'm a hero and she turned me down for a date. What a jerk. You know, and you're like, it just doesn't ring true, because I'm like, as a human being, like I know I'm not perfect and I know I'm full of a lot of flaws. And I feel like the thing I liked about like Robert Crumb is he writes about like his weird like perversions and quirks, and like just like he gets really honest to where you're like, you know, there's times where you're reading, you know, and you're like, I don't know if I'd hang out with this guy, you know, like, and Harvey Pekar, like, you know, American Splendor, it's like, you know, you're like, this guy has anger issues. And it's like, but that's from, you know what I mean? Like, that's actually the author just being that vulnerable. And so for me, like, that was a big thing, was like, if I write it, I need to be self-aware enough to make myself a flawed character, because like nobody likes reading, at least for me. I've never been a guy who like wanted to read Superman, like because of that, like a lot of, you know, and I think Superman's improved since then, but I feel like he's such a perfect character. It's kind of boring. And you can write that, but it's just like, I wanted to write a flawed character. And then also I wanted to make sure I had a story arc. So it's not just like some meandering, because I tend to ramble. And so knowing that about myself, I'm like, when I write, like once I have a concept, I need to have the story structure worked out before I start riffing too much, before I start writing, like, and coming up with characters and plot ideas. I need to actually know, like, am I doing a hero's journey story? Like, what's my story arc? Like, what are the points that this story needs to hit? Like, what's the arc? Mm-hmm. And then fill in the blanks. Because I find when I work the other way, I end up like a lot of the time in conversation, where I'll end up kind of losing the point. And that, you know, to me, it's like, it's really important to have that structure, to work from. And then I feel the freedom to kind of write and riff and stuff. But I do feel like authenticity is a big thing for me in my comic, and a big thing for me in all comics that I think I'm drawn to. So I really try to be as kind of honest and true to the things I love, and that I can be, because I feel like if you're honest with that, you kind of arrive at something that's close to the things you love. So that's why, like, in my comic, I decided to play with typography, because I really love hand lettering. And so I was like, I can't hand letter, but I can try. You know, I'm not that great at these things, but I like these things, so I'll try to implement them.
No, you're doing really, really fucking rad stuff with that, man.
But I think that's, you know, I think that's part of all of our journey, is like, it really does wind up being like kind of like doing what you love. And I think it's very similar to music, where it's like, you know, how do you pick what kind of music you're going to play? You usually, you know, like, hell, like my band right now doesn't sound anything like Refused, but there's been like 2 times where I've been listening to like Shape of Punk to Come and been like, I really like that thing they're doing here with timing. I want to do that. And then I'll implement the timing. So while somebody hears my band, they may not hear Refused. It's like that informed my choice in playing in a certain arena, like on a certain part. And I think it's like that with art. Like, most people wouldn't pick up from reading my comic how much of a Chris Ware fan I am, because what I pick up from Chris Ware isn't like style. It's just more like, I like his pacing and his timing and his patience. And it's like that's the stuff I pulled. So it's like it's weird because it's like you're kind of being authentic, but part of being authentic is kind of riffing on things you love. And I would just on a brief point, and then I want to hear Kevin's, but like with t-shirts, it's very similar, just microscopic version of that. With t-shirts, it often was just filling a sketchbook with rough ideas and not hitting anything. And then driving to work one day and having this idea of like, wouldn't it be funny if like my life were like full of like comic book soundtracks? And then I'd be like, okay, that's funny. How can I phrase that? And then I'd kind of drive, and then I'd be like, yeah, everyday life would be better with like weird sound effects like you have in comics. And then I went home, jotted it down, and was like, everyday life would be cooler with sound effects, and made a little panel strip of like a boring guy's work day and like brushing his teeth, but it's like swish, fwash. But it all riffs off something that just kind of made me laugh. So that's one. Another is if I had an idea that was funny or interesting, and I had this gut feeling like that has to have been done, and then I look and it hasn't. That to me is always like when you're trying to create or come up with concepts or stories, if you think of something that just seems obvious, like that just has to have been done, that's too good, and then you look and you can't find it, that's your window. Like that's the place you should go.
And in that my kind of journey with these t-shirts and things, there's a lot of things that I'm like, oh man, somebody has to have done this, and I look and I'm not finding it. I'm like, oh man, this is it. This is cool.
Yeah, like that Kermit thing, man. Like it took me 30 minutes to do it, but that was one of the best selling designs I ever made, and it literally just resulted from that. Where I'm like, that's a funny bit. Has it been done as a t-shirt? And it hadn't, and I was like, I have to do that, and I knocked it out, and it did okay. So it's like that's the same with Attack of Literacy. Like I just was thinking one day, like I love B-movie posters, I love books, and then I was like, wouldn't it be funny if like there's like a B-movie poster with all these classic authors like on it, like attacking you, like in all the stupid B-movie poster poses that I love so much. And then I was like, that was just like, so it's kind of like weird, but it's like you kind of get amused, but part of how you get the muse is just by like banging your head against a wall and filling journals with endless ideas. And, a lot of the time, like you'll write concepts that are just crappy. Sometimes you'll write concepts you think are great and you throw them. This is, a big part of it too. Like even with story ideas, like when I came up with what I was going to do for my comic right now that I'm formatting, it's like I threw that idea to a ton of people before getting into it. I was like, what do you think about this as a story? Because I wanted their feedback. Like a lot of the time, and you want to say that to people who are more blunt than like, the really supportive people in your life. You want like people who are going to give you straight shot, like, no, that sucks. That's a terrible idea. Or yeah, there's some potential there, but what about this? That's a good start too. Like with t-shirts, that was a huge thing. It was like I'd come up with like 20 concepts and then call a friend of mine who was an illustrator. Like honestly, when I was in Portland, I used to spitball them with Kevin. I'd be like, dude, I thought of these 4 things. What do you think? And he'd be like, nah, 4th one maybe. And that gives you a guiding light and like the area that you should go. So that's kind of a rambly way of saying it, but that's kind of it. And like Scott was saying too, it's really hard to pin down because it is that kind of mysterious thing where there is almost something like, I don't know, weird about it. Like you're tapping into this sphere of ideas that are floating around. What about you, Kevin? Like what do you do to generate and then also to kind of make your stories unique?
There's a couple different ways. I mean, probably the obvious thing is has kind of been touched on. It's like, something pops into your head and, like you said, Josh. It's if it doesn't kind of leave, and I guess maybe I'm putting it a different way or something, but if it doesn't leave your head and it kind of starts to grow as you're going through the days, and everything is making you think of this, then it needs to be told, at that point. But yeah, so a lot of times something will pop into my head, like a funny situation or a weird situation or a bad situation, and if it's something that is striking and interesting enough to me, then like I usually start just naturally thinking, like when I'm going for a run or going to the skate park or something like that, situations start to build on that. And then, if something becomes important and I'm talking stories in this case, I write it down. And then I do kind of like mind map type stuff, like Scott has talked about before. And then sometimes that kills it, and sometimes I'm like, well, that's as far as that goes. I don't need to do it, but then sometimes it's like, no, this story has to be told. That's why I feel like I had to separate that one storyline I was talking about from Monkey Mod in order for it to work and become better again, and actually have this separate story that I've been thinking about forever. Now that one is based on a true story, but and I think a lot actually. Monkey Mod started based on kind of a true story in a way. Remember, we were doing the big illustration party time podcast, and I was, and you were doing, you were talking about Autobio comics and you're working on some and stuff, and I had this little idea based on a conversation we had where we were kind of like, well, how come some nerds become bad? How come some nerds become like the people that picked on them? And so I was thinking about that, and then the whole idea of well, here's this like kind of nerdy guy who's really into rock and roll stuff, and very introverted and trying to get over that. And that was actually the first Monkey Mod mini comic in a nutshell. It didn't even have to be a monkey,
Yeah.
And the reason why I chose it to be a monkey is because I've always liked monkeys and apes at the zoo since I was a little kid, and something about me and where I was at that time too. If I had done a person, it would have felt too real and not sci-fi or something weird to it, and making it a monkey was far enough removed for me at the time. So so that's where that started, and that might be a clunky way of starting an idea, but basically doing the mini comic was also doing the idea kind of out loud, for everybody to see the formation of an idea, I suppose. So there's that. I'm trying to come to something without giving away like what I'm working on now, because I'm just not ready to, But so I just kind of think of the ideas. I think about tropes, like we were talking, and not necessarily try to buck the trends or anything like that, because at a certain point people do need things to grab onto, so don't worry about it too hard. But then as I'm working on kind of a story, I generally come up with usually the beginning and the end, and then fill in the middle as I'm going. And I tend to say, if I'm working on like a Western, we'll say, or no, we can just say this. I work on spy stuff lately. And so instead I will consume Westerns or comedies or things not in the genre.
Yeah, that's great advice too.
Because while there are tropes, I feel like if you stick within the genre, like if I'm really going gung ho on comic stuff, I won't read comics.
Mhm.
You know, because at least for me, that kind of stuff it peppers what I do, and I'll start second guessing, even subconsciously, I'll start second guessing, like, Wally Wood used to do page layouts like this, and I didn't. You know what I mean? And yeah, and that I don't think is a conscious thing. I just noticed that in some pages that I've done in the past, I'm like, oh, I can tell I was reading this comic here.
Mhm.
But these other pages are better when I was reading just prose books,
Yeah.
And sometimes, when you're writing fiction too, I mean, it's such, to me, such good advice that it's cliche. Read nonfiction,
Mhm.
Um,
Especially like history. Like,
especially history stuff,
oh, yeah.
So, but kind of in the development stage, I suppose, I will look at like early on with Monkey Mod, I have some books like The British Guide to Espionage, and I have a book on forensics and things like that. But then when it was time to actually write the meat and potatoes and put the outlines together and everything, nope, not anymore. Now I'm watching Arrested Development and Airplane and stuff like that. So yeah, and then while that's going on, I tend to start working on character designs, and some come easy and some come hard, as you know.
Mhm.
And sometimes the characters change the story as I'm drawing them. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, this character looks like this because I had a happy accident. Now this person's got a mustache. Oh no, now there's a new idea,
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's how it starts. I feel like I'm getting rambly too here a little bit.
No, I like it. You've touched on a lot of really good things, and I like that you brought up kind of reading things outside of what you do, because that, like, a lot of people wouldn't realize, like, while I've been working on this comic, like, my most frequently done thing is listening to like Comedy Bang Bang, the podcast, and like,
Yeah.
which is like an improv, like, goofy show, but it's like for some reason, like, listening to comedy, or like watching like stupid action flicks like Magnum PI, like the original from the 80s.
Yeah.
It's like I watch that a ton while I'm working on this like autobio story about suicide. Like, it's this weird juxtaposition, but it's like if all I were reading was like mopey like autobio stuff, then I think it would start informing what I'm doing. And then not only that, it would also become like, it might become kind of like super soap opera-y and like way too like, so it is interesting. And what you're mentioning is funny too, because like most guys I meet who are like humor cartoonists who do those
Yeah.
like one panel strips, they like listen to a lot of serious stuff and
Right.
are like
Yeah.
really politically active, and like it's weird because you'd think they'd be like really goofy, but they're not,
Yeah. I mean, one of my buds who's a comedian. Yeah, he's hilarious when he's on stage and doing that stuff, but he's not the wacky, goofy guy in real life. That tends to be, I think, when we're hanging out, I'm the wacky, goofy guy, who's writing more serious stuff. I mean, Monkey Mod's kind of is goofy. But he's a professional comedian.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's serious in real life.
I don't know if that's always the case. Like, I have a friend who does voiceover, and like and if anyone has, most of the people that do voiceover, they're pretty much comedians. I mean, they're quick-witted and stuff like that. But he he's always on, and he's always basically looking for attention and things like that. So I guess it depends. I mean, like you
Yeah,
hear
I mean,
that about
it's
like
not
Robin
good,
Williams, where he was always on and stuff like that too. So,
Mm.
but it's interesting to see who, you know, which people that do that for a living are just like, you know, they can be funny when they need to, but they also like to just chill and hang out and stuff. And then some people are just who they are is who they are, you know.
Yeah. But anyway, so back to the idea thing. What I was also thinking too is something that I did in the past that I think helped now is I read a lot of books about the craft of writing and idea generation and stuff. Now, if you dive too deep into that kind of stuff, you can get stuck and then have analysis or paralysis by analysis. But
and then you'll have to have dialysis. It's really a problem.
Oh my God, yeah. And that, damn it, I can't think of a rhyme.
I couldn't dialysis.
But anyway, so part of what I'll do also with the ideas is I will break a simple idea down into like an act 1, act 2, act 3, and sometimes that even has to do with if it's a series of illustrations for a client. So that I'm also thinking how the illustrations all tie in together, you know, and feel like separate but part of a whole, you know, because you know how it works. Generally, it's on a specific project or something. But yeah, I'll break things down and I'll kind of think of if this you know, it's that classic like improv, you know, yes and if this happens, then that happens and it ends up here, you know, and I'll break that down into sections like that. And I've used for fun, and I found that it's really awesome, is the Lester Dent writing formula that he wrote the Doc Savage stuff with.
I remember
me and Josh, and I wish we'd done it. We actually wrote a big illustration party time episode where we were detectives.
Yes.
And somehow we didn't. I don't know if it's, you know, when you had to move back to California or what, but
yeah.
Yeah, somehow we didn't do it, but it was hilarious. We spent like all day like having some booze and writing this noir detective thing about illustrators.
We would do the weirdest things. I mean, I remember one time we watched like 20 like World War II propaganda videos where it's like Neil was on the march, and then we did like a whole, and we did that for like a maybe 5-minute bit on the show.
Yeah. I mean, we were, you know, there's the research. I mean, that is a good point too. There is the research stage, you know, and you know, it might be like that, but you know, we did it, and you know, even if like the World War II stuff we used, but that story that we wrote, that was just pure comedy.
Oh yeah,
and you know, we were younger than and greener, so it's probably terrible, but we thought it was great, and we had a lot of fun. So it was a great exercise, you know, and you know, which is also you think about it, it's a great exercise in collaboration, too. But yeah, anyway, yeah, that brings up the whole research stage. So there's that a little bit. But yeah, anyway, yeah, break everything down, see how I can act 1, act 2, act 3 it, make them different enough, but tie in together so that it's not a boring one, you know, like, I don't know, Superman came to Earth, then he could fly because of the sun. Then he saved a lady named Lois. That's the end of the issue. Yay. You know? What happened in between all those points, you know? Because if you just say those points, it's boring. So yeah, there's that. Sometimes as far as the story goes, I've used that method where you write things on an index card and you do it in a linear order, and that's kind of what I'm doing right now. put things in a linear order and mix them up.
Yeah, you'll have to watch my video tomorrow, Kevin, because I talk about doing that same thing, but using Trello.
Okay. Yeah, I was
'Cause-
using Trello. The only problem with me is, for me, I've tried to use it, but it's if something's digital on my phone and I shut it off, it's gone. Like out of sight, out of mind. I need paper.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah.
Me too. I'm the same way.
But yeah, I am interested. That's coming out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's a quick one. It's only it's less than 5 minutes. It's my quick tip video, but
yeah. So the new story I'm writing, it's like I said, it's based on a true story with a different setting. So the names are changed and things like that. So there's a lot of flashback and moving forward by looking back and stuff like that. So that method really helps. Well, is helping, I should say.
Yeah.
With that. So, yeah, what else? I've been talking mostly about comics, I guess, because that's what's on my mind, because I've been working on them quite a bit lately. But yeah, the only illustration thing I said is for me, because oftentimes it's not just one image that I work on.
Mm-hmm.
So there's usually a series or something. So yeah.
Yeah, that it's interesting too, because like with illustration and with comics, I think there's also this thing you kind of learn, and I think we all have down, which is like, you think of a concept, like especially if you're doing editorial or like interpretive illustration where it's like not so clear cut. First, your first idea is usually like really obvious and literal, and kind of like most of the time it's going to be like the image is completely horizontal. It's like, it's perfect. It's rigid. It's at everything's at a 90-degree angle. And that's most people's first inclination. I know it's mine. So what I do when I get it like illustration clients is like, I jot that down first.
Mm-hmm.
And then instantly think, how can I do this differently where it's not the obvious?
Yeah.
Where the angle's different. And that gets informed by all sorts of things. Like, do I want this to feel, you have to start thinking about the feeling you want to convey with people.
Right. Because emotion's important.
Yeah. And one of the coolest things about that is like, you can have a huge advantage. Like, one of the biggest advantages I've had as an illustrator is that trick.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a billion illustrators out there who can draw better than me, but I was better at framing things in more unique ways, or like pulling tight on something when people would have usually shown like a full body, or taking a different view. And like, if you do that, if you learn that trick, you can actually, it's terrible to say, but it's like, you can actually pull off more dynamic illustrations with less quality of drawing and still pull off the job in a way where it looks better, And I've seen, anyhow, my point is I've seen us all implement that, but I think that's an important thing when it comes to concepting, especially in illustration, where you've got one image to say what you need to say. It's like, but I think also in comics, where it's like you have your frame, your panel, and you really want to think about that flow, the page flow, and like what you're saying and stuff with each image, and how you can kind of like, okay, I want to show, like I said, I want to show a talking head here. Could I instead, they're having a conversation, could I instead show like a hand? It's a cliche, but it's like the whole washing dishes thing, right? Like, can you show the person washing the dishes and maybe focus on their hands while they're having a conversation with somebody? And kind of, change up the perspective and stuff. So like, I think that's something we all implement that helps with concepting too, because that can inform it, where you're like, what's this about? Okay. One of my favorite Tomer Hanukkah illustrations is that one where it's like this guy lighting a cigarette at night, and the whole piece is just about magenta. It's like about glowing magenta. It's just all focused on the ember of that cigarette. And it's one of the most beautiful illustrations in the world. And like, the whole thing was like probably arrived at by that, where it's like, well, I need to show this guy doing this thing. What can it be about? And I don't know. I'm rambling, but I feel like that's something I definitely see you utilize a lot, Kevin, in your illustrations too, where you'll kind of like, I've seen you rough stuff and you'll kind of rough with like a little bit more of the conventional. And then by the end of it, you've changed it to be more dynamic and a little like a lot different than like that initial thing most people would think, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the process for me too is, you know, whether it's comics or illustration, you know, because, you know, as we know, the cliche is good illustration needs to tell a story on its own, you know, to invite the person to be like, what happened before or after, unless it's just a decorative type of design device or something like that. But but that's part of the process is doing the sketches. Yeah, I go obvious. First thing is obvious, and it's just to get it out, you know.
Yeah.
And I know that that's not going to be what it is. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the stuff might just be obvious to me, like growing up as a skater or surfer in California. You know, summertime means hot girls and waves and skating with my buds, you know. And so I might do, oh, summertime. Well, that's the obvious thing to do, you know, for somebody who grew up on the West Coast in California. But so I might get some of that out of the way. But then, you know, you got to think back to like, if the thing is fun in the sun, fun summertime, what are the little things? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are the smaller things, you know? And sure, it might take place at the beach, and sure, somebody might have a surfboard or a skateboard or something like that. But, you know, then the next, you know, this isn't an assignment I've been given. I'm just coming up with one on the fly. Then I might think of when it was really hot, and me and my friends would go get Slurpees at 7-Eleven, and the stand-up arcade game 720 was there, and so we're still skateboarders. We're still like way into skating, but that was really fun because then we're just talking smack and having a good time. Maybe that's too obvious though. So maybe, you know, might find something deeper and more personal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was a podcast I was listening to a while ago, illustration podcast that's out now, and I can't remember which one. It might have been one of the comics ones too. But somebody was a teacher, and they were talking about an assignment that they had given for class, and it was to illustrate, like, I think loneliness. I think it was an emotion, or somebody had to pick an emotion out of a hat or something like that. And so, but whatever the reason, the guy was talking about loneliness ended up getting picked or whatever. And, you know, there's a lot of like people alone, and, you know, with big black circles and wearing black, and there might be like them walking away from the viewer with the street light just on them and a little garbage can sticking out, but you can't see anything past it, or, you know, things like that. And then either him or someone else drew a treehouse in the wintertime.
Nice.
And I was like, that's fucking powerful right there. You know, because that's like, you know, just, it's abandoned. It's not like there's no life in a treehouse in a winter landscape, you know, whereas in the summertime it's full of kids and laughing and, you know, color and, you know, all that stuff. And treehouse in the wintertime, I was like, that is genius.
Yeah.
And well, so I'm not saying I ever get to that level, but I try, you know.
Yeah, and you know, like I'm glad you brought that up, because that even makes me think like another way of depicting loneliness that most people would relate to is like, you don't have to just show somebody alone, like show somebody in a giant party, you know, like, yeah, like it's you know, like most people talk about feeling alone in crowded rooms and stuff. So you can go with like the unexpected, where it's like, you know, and play it with expression and angle or something like that. I think there's a million ways to like do the unexpected on those kind of things. And I think when you do that, it does differentiate you from the pack, you know, because it's like,
yeah, what I think, what we're both probably trying to say here too is like, probably not just, explore the unexpected, I think, as part of your, thumbnails or writing process or something like that. But it has to be intentional. Like, you can't just be like, well, an example of Monkey Mind. I wanted a giant monster in a comic. That was a thing I wanted to do.
Yeah.
That was one thing. That was before I'd really written the story. And I was like, I want a giant monster in the story, like a Godzilla type monster. And there is one. But it comes with intention, even though it seems like my initial statement makes it sound like it's just from left field for no reason,
Yeah.
So that's maybe I'm going a little bit backwards, because that is going backwards. But say you do a comic and you're like, I want a giant monster to be unexpected and wow the crowd. Unless there's a reason for it, it's boring. Like, there has to be an intention. Just has to be intention to you throwing that curveball, because when there's intention to it, then you get something that really communicates and really is effective and strong. Otherwise, it's boring and pointless.
And you've touched on something really good there too, which is also like ties back to kind of what we were beginning with, which is like, you do kind of want to include things you love. So like,
right.
Like even with this autobio comic, it's like there's weird stuff I've wanted to try with paneling. Like there's this weird thing I saw Dave Baker do, and I've seen a couple other people, but when I saw Dave Baker doing it, I was like, well, I got to try it. It's like the idea of having panels that actually overlap each other and almost become like this crazy collage where it's telling a story, but you actually have like panels overlapping dialogue and like, so it's almost like just intentionally making the panels chaotic, but still to further the story. And I had been looking for points in my story where I could do that, and I finally arrived at one and was like, sweet. And there's so many things like that where I wanted to have all sorts of little elements that I liked, like paneling exercises that I couldn't include until I came to a part where it just made perfect sense. But it's like one of those things of like, you want to look for opportunities, like look for stories that are going to allow you to draw things you love and kind of explore things you love. Like if you love doing giant monsters, why wouldn't you write a comic that has giant that's insane to not have giant monsters in your comic if you love giant monsters.
Right. Yeah. Because like we could definitely get like really break it down and get like really like NPR about everything, but at the same time, part of the process is also to be like, dude, I think giant monsters are super rad.
Yeah.
So I want to have fun with it. And sometimes, like you're talking with that paneling and stuff, sometimes that is just where an idea starts, is because you're like, I like this technique or concept that I've never worked with. I want to challenge myself to do that. It can be just as simple as that. And then, and sometimes it can be as simple as, I want to have fun today,
Totally.
But yeah, so, I guess the point is there's no, I don't know. I don't know is there a wrap up to this, because everyone's is different. It's just kind of cool to hear everybody's take on it,
Yeah, I love talking story, and it's fun because it's like, I think a lot of the time when we draw and stuff, like even when we're working on comics, it's like you script it, and then like at least the point I'm at, I scripted most of this stuff like 4 years ago. So I've just been focusing on the aesthetics and just kind of making it work and flow. But it's fun to think about structure and like, intention and stuff, because that also really saves your ass. Like when you're working on a big project, like if you don't have something well structured or well written, and then you're like, 100 pages in, you can really be in a bad spot. So the nice thing is if you do your due diligence and get that structure and like really put in those things you love, like you can bear with it for a while.
In the video that's coming out tomorrow, the Kevin Reed's Comics video that's coming out tomorrow about Devil Dinosaur issue 2. At the end, what I'm going to try to do and start doing more is kind of like little critiques of like storytelling, stuff like that. And I don't want to get like too highfalutin because it's really supposed to be mostly about like the jokey part, But there was parts in that where I was just like, there's a lot of filler in here. It didn't propel the story forward. It didn't propel the characterization. Like there's no characters got there. They're just filling pages to make deadline or something. And I was bummed. I was bummed on it. So there is, whether it's fun or doing high concept or, I just feel like everything's got to have some intention behind it,
Yeah, I agree. I'm reminded of like I used to be obsessed with watching like Naruto episodes with my wife, and like we'd be all excited because the story is advancing, and then it would come to this like filler episode where they just have him go out for ramen, and it's like they ran out of ideas, so it's just this bit that they just do for like 4 episodes, and you're like, oh man, come on, advance the story, So yeah, I've had this rule for myself, like make sure I'm not doing ramen moments. I have to like be like, this is a side plot,
Yeah, I mean, I could see like an episode of that where it's just like, I think what's the Teen Titans Go or whatever, where it's like it's just them hanging out, eating pizza, and playing video games and stuff. Like that's kind of cool sometimes to see the hero like just doing regular stuff, But yeah, when it's all filler, like Salazar says, I like ramen too much. Man, I live right next to this place called Drunken Noodle, and it's almost midnight and they're closed. I'm hungry. But anyway, but yeah, that's cool. But when it becomes like the filler for every time, like, what are we going to do? Well, he's going to the noodle place.
Well, and part of why I don't want to do it too is like I loved Spider-Man as a kid, and they pulled that all the time there that I got into Spider-Man, where it was like, an episode where he'd just be like walking around town, and then like a villain would show up, and you're like, all right, the fight's on, it's gonna happen, and then like the next issue, it's like just filler. And you're like, come on, like I just spent $3 on this, or $2 on this, or $1 on this. I can't remember because it's, I'm sure, substantially more expensive now. But yeah,
well, Scott's been sitting over there thinking about whether or not Snake got the file and the pack of cigarettes in that cake.
What?
It's true.
Looked like you're thinking about your prison buddies.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
The hand that's off screen is like sharpening a toothpick and or like a plastic fork.
Oh.
Give it a little,
Well, I've escaped the tears, so I guess that means I've escaped jail. So I don't have to worry about any of that anymore.
You haven't escaped yet, Scott. You'll be in the next Artcasters. So stay tuned, you guys, to see Scott's jail escape. Thanks to everybody out there who's joined us in the chats and also who purchased these wonderful shirts of Scott's, which you can still get. And helped him get to those second tiers, and also made my night way more amusing to see Scott with 2 prison tiers. #prison tiers. It's awesome. All right. So anyhow, we'll close out. You're on my channel. You know where to find my stuff. It's here. You can hit subscribe, hit that bell. And if you haven't yet, go to quarterlystories.com and read my comics. And if you're not really wanting to read comics, just look at like illustrations and graphic designs and all that. Check it out at joshuakimball.com. Kevin, where can everybody find your wonderful new videos? There's 2 new right now that you guys can check out where?
Yeah. For now, I'm just going to point people to my YouTube channel. It's what is it? youtube.com/KevinCrossArt or youtube.com/monkeymodcomics, I believe. It's got two names. It goes to the same place. I'm assuming there'll be probably a link in the description or something like that.
Yeah,
but
the link I guess was broken, so I'll have to figure that out. But
try
honestly,
Kevin Cross,
just
Kevin
go to
Cross
YouTube
Art.
and type in Kevin Cross, and it'll come up. I mean, it's pretty much that easy. You're not gonna. I mean,
Oh,
but yeah, there'll be a new video out tomorrow, and yeah, so at some point tomorrow, because right after this, I have to finish putting the edits together and uploading it and stuff. So
sweet. Keeman just rightly mentioned, and this explains how tired I've been, but we're not on my channel. You should still subscribe and hit that bell. But yeah, we're not on my channel this week. It's on Scott's channel. Although I'll be taking it over. Oh wait, Scott, what's that in your hand?
in my hand.
Put that shank down.
the shank.
Oh yeah. It's out of view.
Cheers. All right, so Scott, before you earn more tears by murdering me, where can everybody find your stuff, and also how do they keep track of this crazy thing? Because it goes from my channel. I don't know how we keep track.
Yeah. So you can find me at circworks.com if you want to get some of the shirts like the one that Josh modeled. The reach for the stars. Just remember they're hot. Or this one, the official 20-year anniversary of. It's a year late now that it's 2020, but it's still, I think it's still, decent shirt. But yeah, if you want to support the brand, I got this one up here and a bunch of other stuff. Or let's see, where's that? So yeah, if you just go to amazon.com/shop/circwork or shop/circworks, you can find that stuff. And also those, those St. Patrick's Day shirts, they're up there too. If you want to check those out, if you're going to go out on St. Patrick's Day and drink and have a good time and you want something cool to wear, they're in black and green and maybe another color. I don't know. It shows up as black. I wanted them to show up as green, but I guess everything defaults to black. But anyway, you can choose your own color on those. So yeah, so that's where you can find that stuff. And like Josh mentioned, we do this show every week, usually on Thursday, usually around 9 Pacific time. Sometimes we'll go later or whatever. But if you want to know exactly or close to when we're going to go live and the day stuff, the easiest way to do that is to sign up for our mailing list. There's a link in the description for that. And we don't spam you or anything like that. We usually just send an email out, about 30 minutes before we go live. So you can click on that. You can find us because YouTube doesn't always push that stuff out. So it might be a good thing to just join that. And other than that, I just want to thank Kevin for coming on. I want to thank everyone in the chat, especially. I mean, we had a lot of activity in the chat, especially since we kind of are going really late tonight. So we got some night owls out there. So thanks to everyone in the chat, and yeah, we'll see you guys later. That is all.